It's one of the things in both cases that makes it more difficult is that both Hamas and LH use civilians as human shields. They put their stores of weapons in apartment buildings, beneath church, mosques and churches and schools and hospitals in order to make it more difficult to strike them. Because of that complication, that has increased the occurrence of civilian casualties. I think, let's not kid ourselves. This is a complicated, very difficult battle space, so we need to do everything we can. The Israelis need to do everything they can to be as careful as possible to protect civilians in that battle space. But Hamas and LH make it more complicated.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Right, hold us to this.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Right, hold us to this.
And again, I think that was a really good engagement with a number of our allies. And following that, we had a G7 ministerial, and the first ever G7 ministerial, defense ministerial, and I think that was very productive as well. You went with us as we went into Kyiv. Following that, we were able to engage President Zelensky and his leadership on a number of important issues. We announced yet another presidential drawdown package, and then finally today finished up with a visit to the Vatican. So again, I think it was a good trip overall, and I'll stop there and take your questions.
Rob,
Mr. Secretary, you just met with the Pope, had an audience with him. Can you share more about what you discussed, and did he talk to you about any of the conflicts in Ukraine or the Middle East?
Well, it won't surprise you that the Pope Ukraine and also in the Middle East as well. He's concerned about humanitarian issues in both areas, concerned about humanitarian issues in both areas, and of course we share a common desire to see these conflicts scale back in terms of the level of activity and a ceasefire in both cases. Again, I think he'll continue to exercise his influence to do the right things, and on Ukraine can defend itself and its sovereignty. And number two, as we've said a number of times, we're going to continue to support Israel in its efforts to defend itself. Israel in its efforts to defend itself. We need to dial down the tension in the Middle East region, and we need to also find a way to transition in Ukraine. Now, as we've said all along, we're going to continue to support Ukraine, and they will determine when the time is to go to the negotiating table. But you've heard me say before, this conflict will end in some kind of negotiation at some point. Thanks.
Bill.
Mr. Secretary, in his nightly video address last night, Ukraine's President Zelensky called on allies not to hide and to respond to evidence of North Korean involvement in Russia's war in Ukraine. So I'll ask you, have you seen any evidence that North Korean troops are in Russia? And if so, what is the intent of this deployment?
Well, our analysts they continue to look at this. Now, we are seeing evidence that there are North Korean troops that have gone to Africa. Now, what exactly? Excuse me, not Africa, but Russia. What exactly they're doing, left to be seen. These are things that we need to sort out. We'll have more for you on that later. But yeah, as we continue to look at this, there is evidence that there are DPRK troops, in Russia. So.
Eric.
Just to follow up on that, sir, can you talk a little bit about what you understand the intent of those troops to be, and what does it say about perhaps the desperation of Putin that he's actually to rely on these kind of troops? What role is that, and what is North Korea getting in return for that? What's the quid pro quo in that?
All things that we're trying to gain better fidelity on, Eric. Number one, why are the troops there? We'll continue to pull this thread and see what happens here. if they're co-belligerents, their intention is to participate in this war on Russia's behalf, that is a very, very serious issue, and it will have impacts not only in Europe, it will also impact things in the Indo-Pacific as well. We've seen South Korea, or the Republic of Korea, be very focused on this issue as well. So still a lot of answers, a lot of things to be answered, Eric, and our analysts will continue to work this, and we'll have more for you as we get more. Yeah, unknown. Certainly there is Russia and DPRK. You've seen DPRK provide arms and munitions to Russia, and this is a next step. But what it means, and this is a next step. But what it means in terms of where Putin is, you've heard me talk about the significant casualties that he has experienced over the last 2.5 years. This is an indication that he may be even in more trouble than most people realize. But again, he went tin-cupping early on to get additional weapons and materials from DPRK and then from Iran. And now he's making a move to get more people, if that is the case. If these troops are designed to be a part of the fight in Ukraine. But we'll see. These are questions yet to be answered.
Natasha.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. 2 quick questions via of leaking highly classified intelligence about Israel. Is that disinformation? Can you rule out that individual is being investigated, and has the probe honed in on a suspect?
There's no OSD official being named as a part of this investigation, so that is not true at this point. I've seen no evidence of that or any indication that any OSD official will be implicated as a part of this.
Okay. And secondly, Israel has claimed that Hezbollah has a major bunker underneath Al-Sahel Hospital in southern Beirut. Doctors who work there have denied the allegation. Has the U.S. seen its own evidence of this bunker underneath that hospital?
We've not seen evidence of that at this point, but we'll continue to collaborate with our Israeli counterparts to gain better fidelity on exactly what they're looking at.
Laura, Mr. Secretary, I understand you shared with the Ukrainians your duty spend plan for the next 5 months for the Ukraine conflict. As you know, 5 months is after the inauguration of what will be a new administration. So if Trump gets elected, will you speed up that plan to ensure Ukraine gets all the money that Congress has allocated? And how will you ensure that all of the equipment actually gets delivered, since that takes longer?
Well, as we commit the funds, Laura, everything won't be delivered immediately. So things that we're purchasing now, for example, may wind up showing up a couple of months later. And as we laid out the plan on what we're investing in with both our USAI funds and the drawdown materials that we're providing, when we can get some of those materials refurbished and into Ukraine. And again, it's not instantaneous. It may take weeks, or in some cases a couple of months. But we laid that plan out for them, and we're confident that based upon what we've done and what we are doing, that those things will be delivered in the timeline that we've outlined.
But a new administration could change that and could stop those deliveries.
They would have to de-obligate, the things that we've already obligated. So I think we're pretty sure that these materials will continue to flow.
And thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. While you're in Ukraine, President Zelensky spoke of some $800 million the U.S. has pledged towards drone. Zelensky spoke of some $800 million the U.S. has pledged towards drone production. What is the purpose and goal of that? And is that just for cruise missiles?
Well, we're going to continue to invest in their long-range strike capability. Now, what we've seen is that they've developed the capability to mass produce drones that are very, very effective and that can go impressive distances. We've seen them strike targets that are 400 kilometers beyond beyond the border and even deeper with precision. And they can do that at a fraction of the cost of a ballistic missile. So it makes sense to invest in that capability and their ability to continue to scale. I think that answers addresses the needs that they'll have not only now but long into the future.
Would you say that addresses the long-range strike question that we keep bugging you about?
We, as you've told you so many times, the range when they attack them is 300 kilometers. They're striking targets that are beyond 400 kilometers with precision. So, you know, and they can do that at a fraction of the cost. So this balances out the balance sheet here. And you know, if we're going to be able to, if they're going to be able to sustain their efforts, got to be able to afford it. And so it makes sense for them to expand the capacity. It makes sense for us to invest in what they're doing. It works. It's effective, and it's precise.
Thank you. And our last one, Missy.
Thanks so much. In Lebanon, the targets that Israel is striking in the Beirut area have widened beyond military sites, hitting municipal buildings and health clinics. Last night, there were intense strikes on apartment buildings, and now Israel's issuing the warning, as Natasha mentioned, about this hospital, suggesting that could be a target. And then, on the other hand, in northern Gaza, the UN is describing the situation there as beyond catastrophic. The UN says the IDF is, continuing its offensive there, denying permission to rescue people from the rubble. Only a handful of trucks are reaching the north each day, and meanwhile, the Netanyahu government, some of the ministers today were having conversations about resettling Gaza and extending the occupation there. All of that to say, I know you are a strong supporter of Israel's self-defense, but you've also said that how they do it matters. In your view, as someone who has commanded counterinsurgent campaigns extensively, do you think that they've gone beyond self-defense on both of these fronts to something that's more punitive or indiscriminate? And are you worried that Israel's actions are weakening, not strengthening its security in the long term?
Well, Missy, you've heard me say on a number of times a couple of things. Number one, the ability to accomplish your goals militarily in terms of achieving objectives and protecting humans protecting civilians in the battle space. You can do both of those things. They're not mutually exclusive. And the other thing that I've emphasized throughout, Missy, is the need to protect civilians and provide that humanitarian assistance. And this is something I talk to my counterpart about every time I talk to him. Those two things. We got to be more precise in our operations, and we got to be more precise in our operations, and we have to make sure that we're doing what's necessary to get assistance and aid into the civilians. We'll create a generation of Palestinians that really will continue to resist cooperating with Israel in the future. So you're actually increasing the numbers of insurgents in the space if you fail to do that. It's a strategic imperative in my view.
Okay, but just to clarify, is in your view are the actions that they're taking on both scripts? Is in your view are the actions that they're taking on both scripts?
Well, it's one of the things in both cases that makes this more difficult is that both Hamas and LH use civilians as human shields. They put their stores of weapons in apartment buildings, beneath mosques and churches and schools and hospitals in order to make it more difficult to strike them. Because of that complication, that has increased the occurrence of civilian casualties. I think, let's not kid ourselves. This is a complicated, very difficult battle space, so we need to do everything we can. Israelis need to do everything they can to be as careful as possible to protect civilians in that battle space. But Hamas and LH make it more complicated.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time. And thank you, Mr. Secretary. All right, we'll just move this.
Again, I think that was a really good engagement with a number of our allies. And following that, we had a G7 ministerial, and the first ever G7 ministerial, defense ministerial.